and no one can whoop him. Only last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick.
Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Chris coming at you with another episode to the Beautiful Struggle podcast. And this is episode 27. And today I have an amazing guest on. I've been wanting to sit down with her for a long time now. And for those of you that are first time tuning into this podcast, a quick overview of this podcast. The Beautiful Struggle podcast is all about empowering my people to live the lives that they deserve. That's what it's all about. So with that being said, we have a first-time artist on here. In addition, she's a Puerto Rican artist, so that just makes it 10 times better. And so she really focuses on vibrant Puerto Rican fine art and Caribbean home decor and makes beautiful work. We're sitting right here, and I'm looking at her work, and it's just absolutely amazing. So you can go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Hello. My name's Lena del Sol Langine. Happy to be here.
Cool.
Thank you for that lovely intro.
Of course. So, I was telling you earlier, we had like a whole podcast conversation before this. But I was telling you, I came across your work on Instagram. As soon as I seen it, I absolutely loved it, and I just had to follow you. And there's a couple things that I noticed from your work in particular that drew me to it, and we'll talk about that a little later. But before we get into that, I really want to know, I got a little icebreaker question for you. What was your favorite Puerto Rican dish to eat? Because you said you're a pescatarian now, right?
Now I am.
Yeah.
And transitioning into, I guess, veganism. Probably penny. When I was really young though, because right now I'm very anti-pork.
Yeah, no, I am too.
Yeah.
I don't eat pork either.
Good,
I don't eat pork either. So yeah, pork
probably.
or beef. I stick to chicken.
Oh yeah, good for you.
Yeah, cool.
My son,
Yeah, I had to say mofongo.
Mofongo.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So we can just get right into it and kind of start with like where you grew up. Like I was reading a little bit about you. I thought you were born in Puerto Rico for some reason, but you were actually born in Toronto.
Yes.
Interesting.
I should have asked you what you were going to ask me before.
You don't have to get, too detailed, but, just.
Oh, so what do you want to know? What was the question?
I mean, so just like your early life, like you
My
said,
early life?
so you started in Toronto and then you kind of moved to New York and grew up there.
Yeah. So I was born in Toronto a long time ago. And so we grew up, I grew up mainly in Toronto until maybe like early teens. But we spent summers going back and forth to New York because I had a lot of family in New York. So we'd spend like summers in Brooklyn with my grandfather. Nice. And this is like back when, when New York was really New York, and so, yeah, I had a lot of exposure to New York very early on. Yeah. And then later on in life, I moved there permanently when I was, oh my gosh, maybe my late teens. New York always, what I liked about New York is that there was so much color. There were so many people there.
It's a melting pot.
Exactly. Yeah. That looked like me and that came from the same ethnicity, the same cultural background as me. Toronto had that, but I don't know what it's like now. But back then, I don't know. It was just there's a lot of culture. There's a lot of ethnicities, just like New York. But it was not as much, I guess.
Yeah, I will say the beautiful thing about New York is you can go there and like any section of a city belongs to a certain ethnicity of people. Like, so you go to like the Bronx and there's like a whole section of Puerto Ricans there, and you go to other towns and there's like a whole section of like Jewish people, Black people, whatever the case may be,
Absolutely.
So you don't really get too much of that out here in California.
You don't at all. And I think that exactly what you said is what I was searching for. Like, so I always appreciated, like in New York, you could go to any, like you said, any section and you hear your music.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's accepted and it's celebrated. It's not like, questioned or like, but I always tell everybody, like, Toronto is a beautiful place. I can understand my parents' train of thought when it comes to wanting to raise a family there. It was safe at the time. I don't know what it's like now, but it was safe. Very safe suburban upbringing. It just wasn't for me. And I knew that as a kid. I knew that I was not meant to stay there. And I just didn't know where I was. Well, I knew I was going to New York eventually, but I just didn't know how, I should say, or when. For whatever reason, Toronto was where I was supposed to be born, the early upbringing, but I knew it wasn't for me. I never felt at home there.
Got you. And you said you grew up in Queens, right?
Yeah,
Got
Jamaica
you.
Queens. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But how was life like back then? How was the community? Like, how was...
in Jamaica Queens, well, it was New York. It was New York had a different energy, pre-gentrification, making, Times Square into like Disneyland or whatever, I find that, people always say to me, New York has a big, a big art community. And I find that 80s and early 90s New York did, but now it's very contrived. It's it's not what it used to be. It's not the same like Lower East Side where, there was graffiti, there was tagging, there was a freedom of like cultural and creative expression that doesn't exist anymore.
Gotcha.
What's in place of that now are all these like luxury lofts.
Definitely.
These neighborhoods that don't exist anymore. So
for sure. So when did you really start taking art seriously, or when did you discover that you were, hey, I have potential here, or like I'm an artist, or when did it happen for you?
How much time do you have? Okay, let me condense this. So
no, go ahead.
So I always knew from when I was young, right? Like that I was an artist. I always say to people that if you're having trouble figuring out what your purpose is, like why God made you, why you're here, look to what you enjoyed doing as a child, when time wasn't a factor, when money wasn't a factor. What could you do for hours on end, uninterrupted, and it gives you complete bliss. And for me, that was always drawing. I'd spend hours drawing and reading, I should say, because I always loved to write as well. Read and write. In terms of drawing, I would just draw for hours. If my sisters ever hear this podcast, like they know that I had like tons of sketchbooks when I was young, and I'd always sketch like designs, because I've always been into like I love decor and I love fashion, and I love like these different ways that we can express who we are creatively, through these things that have to do with our identity, our unique identity. So that when I was young, that's what I'd spend a lot of time doing, constantly drawing, constantly sketching. I'd be in class. I didn't like school. I was not good at math, still not, and I'd just be in there sketching. I'd have pages and pages of like just pictures and drawings.
Do you have any of those like old pictures?
I think they're in storage somewhere, but I have them because they're important to me.
Pretty cool to see, for sure. Wow, that's pretty amazing. So when did you really start taking it serious and like wanted to take it to the next level? Okay,
so that happened, and this is where God really shows up, right? So in my background in terms of traditional employment was in nonprofit management. So I worked for a case manager for a couple of years as well, with LGBT youth in New York. But I always worked within the nonprofit sphere because I love people, and I have, a passion for the disenfranchised, definitely. But for years and years, so I've always been a single parent. and it was just always been my son and I would come home from work and I'd just be like down, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't created to just be in this wheel and go to work and make sure the rent is paid and make sure the bills are paid and make sure this child is taken care of and just go to sleep and do it all over again every day of my life until I die. That started coming up for me. And so fast forward to like maybe like 2012, I was working at a nonprofit in Queens, and something happened. I came home and I had that same thought that I just told you about, and I was just like, God, you know, I know you put me here for more than this. I know you put me here for more than this. Like, you have to, like, I can't. Something's got to give. Yeah. And so I met somebody. I was in a relationship. And I haven't been in many relationships. It's just always been about taking care of my son. So when I met that person, they saw me sketch something one day. And they were like, wow, you drew that? And I'm like, yeah. So they went to Michael's and got me some canvas and stuff. And I wish I had a picture. I'll show you after, but like I'll have to find it in my phone. But I sketched when they bought me that, what came out of it was this painting. It was charcoal that I did. And I'm like, okay, because I always knew as well that I did know that I'm meant to be a business owner, and I've done different, independent things. I did some a writing service. I used to write resumes and essays and things like that, and editing. So I dipped my hand in different business ventures before this, but when I made that painting, I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do, because I've had many different jobs, so many. Many different fields other than the nonprofit sector, because a lot of times I work 2 jobs. I've done many things. Was a personal trainer for many years as well. But painting, it was like, I remember when I painted that, I literally, like, I looked up at the clock, and I don't remember the exact time, but it was like 1:00 in the afternoon, say. Wow. And I looked, and it was like 10 at night. Yeah. I got lost in it, like when I was a kid. Wow. So that was when I had that moment, like, okay, I'm going to try this. And then I made the website. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's interesting, because I've had that thought many times where like, man, God, I know I'm here for a greater purpose. I know I'm not here just to go to work, 9 to 5, come home, sit on the couch or whatever. I know I'm not. Yeah. And so it's like, once you have that thought, it's like you can't go back from it. No. You have to pursue whatever that is that gets you to that next level. Yeah. So I completely agree with that. And I try to tell people all the time, like, what are the odds of you being born? Like, if you really look it up, the number is, I think they say you're more likely to get struck by lightning like 5 times than to be born. Yeah. So you got to be here for a reason. If you don't at least believe in God, you got to be here for a reason, Absolutely. So that's interesting. So from there, you start creating artwork. So what drew you to create art around like the Puerto Rican culture and the Caribbean culture?
That goes back to childhood again. I think, like many of us, like many people, not only us, people of color, like everybody in the whole world, we all have issues with our family, right? Like we got complicated family dynamics. So my parents aren't perfect by any means. But there are things that I know were of interest to them, like natural draws to them. And one of them was travel. So especially when I was really young, I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and we're all 5 years apart. So before my...
You said what? How many days? 5 years?
5 years apart.
Oh, I thought you said 5 days.
No.
5 years.
Yeah. Excuse me. And so when before my youngest sister was born, we did a lot of traveling. We go to different islands. I've been to the Bahamas, Barbados, Trinidad, Puerto Rico, so many places.
How often would you visit Puerto Rico?
Maybe once a year, something like that. And Yeah, because they do it. It was kind of like so we did New York in the summer, and then some other time throughout the year we were in in the Caribbean. And looking back on it, I don't even know how they did that financially, but they did it. They made it happen because it was important to them. And so, to answer your question, I remember being young, and I just, you know, if you think about it and imagine like Toronto, imagine New York, like it's great cities, but it's gray. It lacks color. It lacks vibrancy. Majority of the time it's cold. Now I go to the islands and to Puerto Rico. Oh my gosh, it's like color everywhere. And to me, color represents vitality and life, right? And not only life, but living, because there's a difference, right? So when I go there, I just be in awe, man, of like the landscapes. And not only like colors in terms of like even the fruits, even the foods, even like the natural landscapes, the foliage, the things that are like unique to the Caribbean. So, and then definitely to top it off, it's like the warmth of the people, and I always appreciated the community and the connectivity. But in terms of Puerto Rico, it's like when I speak about and what I feel about Puerto Rico is kind of like it's like an actual person, right? Like so.
That's a good way to describe it, because not to cut you off, but
no, it's okay.
So I've only been one time, believe it or not. I went. What was it, like a year or two? I think it was last year. I went with my wife, like around December, and it was the best. And we've traveled around a little bit, and it was like literally the best trip I've ever been on because of just what you're describing, like the colors, the people, the energy, and it's something about connecting to your roots and where like seeing where your people come from. It just gives you that much more pride in being Puerto Rican. You know, we already wave our flag around crazy as it is, and it's just going back, it's just like it just blew my mind. It just literally blew my mind. And you can just ask my wife. Ever since then, she's like, are you all about Puerto Rico? Like,
is she Puerto Rican too?
She's African American.
Okay.
But she definitely understood it because she knows that you know, that Puerto Rican pride, she sees it in our family. And then her watching me go back, it was just, I'm sure it was a moment for her as well. Yeah, man. You know, for sure.
Yeah, she could definitely pass.
Yes, no. She. If I show you a picture right now, you're gonna be like, she Puerto Rican. I promise you.
Yeah, I saw your wedding picture.
Like you did?
Yeah, you guys are beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful, blessed couple. Yeah. She could pass
for sure. Yeah. That's something else I want to talk about later on in the podcast. But so you say you describe it like a person, you know?
It feels like a love affair, like a healthy one, a really good one. And you know, because when I go, it's I don't even know how to describe it verbally. I feel like I'm home. I always say, and I've said it on Instagram before, like I know at some point in my life I will live, and I know I'll die in Puerto Rico when that time comes, and I'd be happy to, you know, there, because it's like it's just home. And there is something, I believe, spiritual about that land, about Puerto Rico, because you know, like I'm getting look as I'm talking about it, this happens every time, you know. It's like and it's beyond, you know, like what you said about waving the flag. I feel like yes, cultural pride and pride in general, and the need and the desire to connect with a group, and see reflections of yourself, and that is important. But for me, Puerto Rico, like it's not that only. It's just something about the actual land. When I'm there, it just feels like home. It feels like a big warm hug. When I get off the plane, the air smells like mango. It does. Like for me, that's what I smell when I get off the plane. I told you before, I'm very sensitive before we got on the podcast. But, you know, I'm very sensitive to environments. And so that's what it does for me. And it just feels like a warm hug, and like I'm home, like a really loving mother, you know what I mean, is welcoming me home. And especially in El Yunque and the rainforest, oh my gosh, it's just, and I love the islands because I love the simplicity of the lifestyle. And I know, you know, of course in Old San Juan you have like beautiful like homes and condos, and they're all throughout the island. But I'm talking about going out of there, going to places like Louisa, you know. There's a simplicity, and up in the mountains, like there's still a simplicity to life, and making use of what you have available to you, you know. And I just find that, and that's all throughout the Caribbean, right? Like we're such a creative people. You know, taking a piece of bamboo or a piece of wood, and you can make a table. You know, like
no, definitely,
exactly,
super creative people. Some of the most talented people in like entertainment come from there. And I'm always like, I talk to my wife like, oh, he's Puerto Rican. He came from that, like, you know, like, he's talented. You know, so that's crazy that you have such strong feelings. Yeah, and you're so connected like that. I do want to ask, so. I guess you say the genre of your art, is it photo realism?
It is.
That or is
oh,
the
my
type
bio.
Of,
yeah.
Okay.
That's what that is a type of a technique
it's a technique.
Yes.
That's okay.
In art. And so photorealism is exactly what it says. It's you know, a lot of people in the art world have like these opinions about photorealism, and it's not real art. I think it is, because you're not just copying a photo. I mean, there's so many nuances to like a really beautiful light-filled photo, and it's not until you sit down and you try and capture that and replicate it in a painting that you see like, wow, you know. And that's what I started out doing, and that is still my first love.
So how does that work? So you find a picture and you describe it. You go ahead and describe it.
Oh, how did the process?
How does it work? Like, so I've never heard of that technique before. That's why I wrote it down, because I was curious what it is, you know, and how it works.
Photorealism. So yes, you find a picture, but I think most artists will tell you it's never one picture. It's usually a series of like different photos. Like for instance, that vase there that I have painted, that came, and this one here with the canepas, that came from 35 different photos that of plants that I took pictures of in the rainforest in Puerto Rico, because that's part of a larger one I'll show you. So you usually compile a series of photos. The reason why once I print them and then you put them into black and white, because black and white takes away the color, obviously, and then all you have are the shadows, the tones, the highlights, and it allows you to really see the light, so to speak. And then once you do that, it's just about sketching it out, and like I said, it's usually compiled from a series of different photos.
So are you grabbing inspirations from each one of those photos? Okay,
exactly.
Gotcha.
Like I might want, you know, I don't know, the way that a leaf or a banana leaf like curled in one photo, you know, and then take something else, literally a branch from another one, and then you sketch it out, and from there it's just, I would say that's actually, people think painting is the process, like the most tedious process. It's really the preparation, all of those things that I just mentioned. Kind of
like mapping it out.
Exactly.
Got you.
It takes a long time. It's taken me sometimes a month to really map it out, especially when it's like a landscape scene and you're using different photos.
Right.
That's usually how it goes. And then it's just about capturing the light. Photorealism it's a lot of, once you've mastered being able to depict light, and when I say light, I mean natural light, artificial light from a lamp in a painting, warm light, like what just came in. It's midday or early. Yeah, it's midday right now. So like that warm red, pretty pink light you get here in California versus the cool light when it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock.
Right.
Once you've mastered how to capture light, that's it. Photorealism, like people won't be able to tell the difference between that and photography and a photo, you know.
Got you.
And I haven't mastered that, but I'm working on it.
So you said, okay, so in around 2014 you really took it serious, or 2012, around that time you
2012 was when I was working at my last.
Got you. So you started taking it serious. You're still in New York, correct?
Yes.
And you moved to California.
After that.
Yeah. What made you move to California?
So in after I left that nonprofit job, I was doing different festivals and just focusing on building this brand. And just figuring it all out as I went along. I was really focused on festivals because that was the best way to meet people, the best way to definitely grow my mailing list. It was just a good start for what I was trying to do at the time. The relationship that I was in, that same person that bought me that first canvas and paint, I knew for years that I wanted to leave New York. I just didn't know where. New York, just what I said before, I just believed that who God was transforming me into, New York, it just didn't resonate anymore. And I'm a strong believer that you can only learn so much in one place. I felt very bored in New York, and I'm not a bored person. I'm generally not like that. I actually am the opposite. I have problems with busyness, like keeping myself busy. So for me to be frustrated, and so I knew it was time to leave. My son was getting older. We were outgrowing the apartment. I thought I was just going to go to Florida. All New Yorkers go to Florida. You know, that's where we all head.
That's funny because I have an aunt that just literally moved to Florida.
From New York?
Yes. Not from New York, but she was Virginia.
From Virginia, okay.
But she did live in New York. I think she bounced around a little bit, went to Virginia, and then came down to Florida. Moved there. That's funny.
Yeah, everybody goes to Florida. But even that, there was something in my gut that was like, I don't wanna, you know. And also it was so back to your question, what led me to moving here was a series of losses or perceived losses at the time. They were really gains, man. And so that person that I was in a relationship with, we were planning to move here. Made a plan together, you know, and visited here in 2014. If you want later, I could tell you the story behind that. It was my son. It was a whole. Got you. So we visited here on a whim in 2014, and like I told you, we stayed in La Quinta in the desert. And I remember I was sitting in the middle. I took my tripod and I took my camera, and I sat in the middle of the street. I wanted a picture of myself at, you know, a panoramic shot in the middle of the street. And I sat there, and something came over me. I believe that it was the Holy Spirit that was telling me, this is it. This is where I'm going to place you. And in that moment, I just felt so free because, like, in New York, like, everybody, like, it's crowded, man. It's everywhere, and you can't breathe. And I was like, I'm sitting in the middle of the street, and no cars came. Like, I'm safe, you know. And I felt so alive. And so I come back to New York, and I wasn't working. It was a very, very, very scary time at that time. I will tell you, I've never had a problem finding a job. Every door that I knocked on closed, and it wouldn't open. And it got to the point where the rent was due. And I'm getting notices and stuff, and I'm doing everything I can. I even went as far as to go back old school, go back on foot and look for a job. Went to different places, No. Got a bunch of no's. Applied to Starbucks even. I figured if I could get a job at Starbucks, you know, maybe 2. I interviewed there. No, you're overqualified. Well, what?
Right.
Went through all of that and exhausted unemployment. It was a really hard time. This is in 2016.
Gotcha.
At the end of all of that, the person that I was in a relationship with, they had come out here to take a test for a job for what's it called? For the power and is it LA? I can't remember.
Man,
LA.
they're gonna kill me. It's
LA Department of Water and Power. You know what I mean. Like
you.
it's our New Yorkers. It's Con Ed. Con Edison is what we call it in New York. Don't know. So I can't remember right now. But the Water and Power.
Edison?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
But you get it.
Yeah.
So passed the test, got a job offer, came back to New York and said, I don't want to be with you. At my lowest time, you know, and it was really like, okay, all right. And I accepted it, and it was fine because that's their right? Like it's very direct. So now here I am. What now? You know, like that was the plan for them, you know, to go get the job. I joined them, and my son, you know, we lit, and then I look for a job once I'm out here. So what led me, really, I had a breakdown. I had a whole, like a breakdown in terms of like a moment with God, like where I'm like, God, I'm doing everything, like literally everything that I can as a human being to change my circumstances. I'm doing everything that the world tells you to do that will guarantee, and I'm doing air quotes, success, right? And then shortly after that, I got a call from the person that owned my apartment, because it's a co-op. So there was an owner and not a traditional landlord, and said that she's selling the apartment. And I have to be out in a matter of months. So now, you know, I'm still looking for a job. And I'm telling you, Chris, leading up to this, there were so many signs and wonders that God showed me that California is where we're supposed to be. And I had to basically sum it all up, in 2017, the beginning of 2017, like January, she told us that she sold the apartment. We had to be out by June of 2017. Keep looking for a job. The only thing I ended up getting was a temp gig at Sony Music. Somehow they found me. So I did that, but it was only for a couple weeks. Then in maybe a month before it was time to go, I just gave it up to God. I'm like, I can't. Like, there's nothing left for me to do. There's nothing else I can do. And I remember somebody contacted me through email, and she wanted to commission 2 large-scale paintings from me. And I said, wow, okay, all right. It was almost like God answered, like and he's dramatic, right? Like, so you know him, like he's dramatic. He doesn't do anything mediocre in a mediocre way. And so I literally have $15 in my account at that time. And I remember I got all these promptings to clean out the apartment, to purge. I felt like I was leaving. And this seems crazy. It's a month out before we have to leave the home that we've lived in for 20 years. I purged. I donated a bunch of stuff. My son was looking at me like, what? I'm like, look, he told me to do it. Yeah. Did all that. The person that commissioned me to do the 2 paintings, the paintings came up to like, I don't know, I think it was like $4,000. So in 2 weeks' time, I went from $15 to $4,000 in my account, plus what I made from Sony. So now I'm like, wow, okay. You know, and it was summer. So my son was he was off of school, and I called my father, and I just knew that God was telling me to come here. Because really at the end of the day, if you are going through a crisis like this, if you don't have stable income, if you don't have a home, like, what does it matter if I do it there or if I try here? Doesn't matter. It's a crisis wherever you are. So might as well give it a try.
Give it a try, yeah.
And so it worked out. My son went to Toronto for the summer with my father. I sold everything. I couldn't take anything with me. I had no place to go. People showed up out of nowhere. Like I never used Airbnb. Somebody told me about Airbnb, got an Airbnb, and flew out here on July 1st, 2017. And went to an Airbnb in Monrovia. And within a month, I got a job. It was supposed to last for 2 months, and it lasted for 9. And it allowed me to get an apartment here in LA. And then I flew my son out a month later, and he finished high school out here. And that's how God did it.
Wow.
You know, that's how he did it.
And I really, I just appreciate you being transparent. That's big time. And I really appreciate that. So, you know, I just really feel like God puts us through moments where he wants to test us. And you said something key to me. You're just like, I just gave it all up to him. And like at that point, that's what he's probably wanted you to do. And like this point in our lives where like, that's all he wants us to do is just give it up to me. Let me handle it and have faith. And for me, like these past couple months and even the end of last year, I've been telling my wife, like, I got a whole lot of faith. And then God does something to me or something happens to me where I need to have even more faith. So it's like, I'm kind of pushing my limit to see like how much faith I really have. That's what he's doing to me, I believe. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's still
so
doing
like,
that.
It's like things that are happening. I'm like, okay, I need to have even more faith. I thought I already had enough faith, right?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely understand. And that's what he's been doing. It's like every trial, it's amping up in terms of intensity. So even now, I'm still in one now. He gave me time to rest and get, you know, and get, you know, recalibrated out here. He gave me rest because that was a long time of being like I was still a baby in my I was in my infancy in my relationship with him throughout everything I just expressed because I was still very fearful. Now, you know, since him, you know, moving us out here, it's trial after trial after trial, and it's like he keeps amping it up. Like, okay, you have faith, you're obedient. Let's see again, and I believe that will continue, and I believe like he loves us. He's sweet, he's loving, he's tender with us. Like, so he knows when we need to rest. You know what I mean? He knows when we need to decompress. But I believe as long as we're alive, that's going to keep happening because he's going to keep, like, it's all about faith.
Yeah. And I really believe this quote. It goes something like this, like a skilled sailor was never, like his skills wasn't developed from a smooth sea.
Right.
You know, the skilled sailor, it was really like the trials and tribulations of the waves and the oceans and whatnot. And the strongest people go through the most stuff. Yeah. And that's something like my mom used to always tell me when I was little. And it's just mind-boggling to me, you know? Yeah. It really is.
That's so accurate. Like he, you know, even like, and it's changed everything for me. Like even just giving up. Like I came here with 2 suitcases. That was all I owned. And one of them was all art supplies, you know, all my art stuff, just full of my art stuff. And the other one, it was everything that I owned in the world at that point. And what still blows my mind is that it was okay. It was better than okay. It actually felt very liberating. Yeah. So, and I never, 10 years ago, even as recent as 5 years before that, I could have never imagined I'd be okay with that. You know, I had everything in New York, you know, that I needed. I had my sound system. I had every comfort in your home that you think you need. And I believe that in of itself was a huge test, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So now, it's kind of hard to transition from that, but I kind of want to transition into what drew me to your art in particular. And what drew me to your art in particular is, I came across your page, and the majority of your painting, you use women of color and black women, dark-skinned women.
Yeah.
And, I believe Puerto Ricans are misrepresented in our society, in my opinion. And people say, oh, Puerto Ricans, they come in every single color, which is very true, but we don't really see that.
Right.
I don't see that in music. I don't see that in movies. I don't see that in politics so much. And, you watch like the music videos and like the women they have in there is like fair skinned women. There's not anything wrong with that, but like we're not being represented to the fullest potential. And so when I see your art, I'm just like, she's representing, another side of the Puerto Rican culture. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, why do you think that is? Like, is it because I know, in the Caribbean, there's people have issue with colorism, and, it's some people, they don't like their color and they want to be lighter. And it's just, to me, it's a huge issue. And it kind of sucks because there's people like you that go back to the island and appreciate what the island has to offer and the history behind the island and the whole Caribbean. And I just feel like we should be a lot more proud of like who we are, what we look like,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, there's all sorts of theories when it comes to like artists and paintings and, subconsciously why you paint certain things that you paint. But for me, I don't know, but I don't think that applies in my case because a lot of the women that I depict in my paintings are way darker than I am. You know what I mean? They don't, at least I don't see that as a representation specifically of myself. But what you just said about race as it relates to Puerto Rico, I think it's just like race anywhere else. I think it's just seen as anything that is dark skinned, anything that is Afrocentric is not equated with beauty, with desire, with desirability. Look at like everything that you just said when it comes to Puerto Ricans, and even Cubans, even Dominicans, even,
the whole Caribbean
as a whole. It's always these fair-skinned, white-passing people. And I just think it has a lot to do with self-hatred. I think it has a lot to do with society's concept of beauty. Even as it comes down to like things that have been said to me, like, what are you mixed with? As if why do I have to be, or look in the movies, people who look like me or who look like, I don't know, look at Halle Berry. That's only example I can think of right now.
Even my wife, she gets that a lot where they're like, what are you mixed with? And she's like, I'm African American, I'm black.
Black and
that's
black.
That's
That's what she's mixed with.
Right. So she gets that a lot. And man, it's just crazy to me because there's so many people of color in the Caribbean that are so talented, and I feel like it's almost like they don't get that same opportunity because they don't see people that look like them doing what they want to do.
Right. That's the key.
Yeah.
That is exactly what you said is the key. And that is what I want to dispel. So that what we were talking about before in terms of like business and where we want to go with our business and things like that. So I really want to dispel that myth, and I really have a passion for children and young people, always have. Like I really would love to be that person that they can look to and say, okay, so if she can do it, so can I. Yeah. Because what you just said, even about like self-hatred and things like that, like my mother had a lot of that going on without getting too into that. But she my mother, she's beautiful brown skin. My mother, looking back on it, the things that she'd say and do, probably I would even say, now that I'm an adult and I can see my parents as actual people who are flawed just like I am, I would even say that even her choices for choosing, her choice her choice in choosing the husband she chose. So my father, he looks like a white man. So, he's very, So I would think that even influenced her choice.
Gotcha.
And so my point is, I think that why I draw or paint Black women is for that reason, for representation, and also to show that we're there. Yes. Like Louisa was the drop off point when it comes to the African slave trade, like in Puerto Rico.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like 90 to 95% of that city is like Black people.
Yeah, Black, because they're descendants of those slaves. Yeah. The mangroves, those forests there, like there's a lot of history as it relates to slaves, and in that particular area of Puerto Rico. And once again, like what we're talking about, colorism, about society, things like that, like Louisa is very undervalued for that reason. I think that social media has definitely helped, because there's more, like now, I can't remember the name of the festival, damn it. They have it every year in Louisa, but it's given more awareness to Louisa and to that part of the city. And even so there is, and not only there, like throughout the island, but again, just like in media and TV anywhere, look at novellas, it's always white people. That's what it is. And
I definitely agree with you, just being that person, even for myself, like going back to like my communities and being that person, like, hey, if Chris can do it, he looks just like me, he came from where I came from, I can do it as well. I don't have to be any other skin tone, I can look just like him. And for me, I've said this probably a couple times on the podcast, but I go back to like the Obama effect, like him becoming the first Black president. Just imagine how many doors that opened up for other people. So like if we had more people of color in other industries, like it would just open up a floodgate of people, and potential people. Yeah, for sure. Did you have anything else that you want to talk about?
No.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you coming on and being super transparent. This is probably like one of my deepest and intimate podcasts I've done.
Oh, that's great.
So I appreciate you a lot. But when I usually have a guest on, I ask them to leave my audience with like one piece of advice. It can be literally anything. It could be business related, life, religion, anything.
I think my one piece of advice would go back to what I said before about realizing that you're here for a bigger purpose. You're not here. Like I fell into that trap for so many years, that hamster wheel of going to work, coming home, going to work, coming home. And I find that so many of us, we get caught up in that. And I think it's so sad to think of people dying with dreams, you know what I mean, that have never been pursued because of fear. And I would say, like I said, give it to God, ask him, even if you can't figure out what it is that you're here to do. We all were born with a purpose. We absolutely have something to give and contribute to this world, like every single one of us, everyone. So I would say to pursue that, look into that, think back to childhood and what it is that brought you joy, and do something with it. Do it. Just try. Yeah. Because that's important.
Yeah. Have you, there's this motivational speaker, his name is Les Brown. In one of his speeches he said the wealthiest place on the planet isn't Beverly Hills, isn't like New York, it's the graveyard.
The graveyard.
Because so many people die with these brilliant ideas or like these brilliant talents that they just never did anything with it, So it's pretty amazing. Do you want to leave the audience like your social media account, your website, so they can check you out? And I'll definitely leave all her information in the description below. So if you just could tell them.
I can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest under Lena Del Sol Art. Should I spell it out?
Yeah, go ahead.
Lena, LenaDelsol.art. And my website is lenadelsol.com.
Awesome. So on that note, if you guys really want to support this podcast, please share it with somebody and just leave a rating and review. And on that note, I'll catch y'all next week.
That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in bed.